Who are your parents and what was your life like growing up?
Who are my parents? Well, I was adopted when I was young by a guy, and we were raised in a church, in a very church-centric household, so right on the lake by the airport, and he was convicted of molesting a 10-month-old baby. I think it was his granddaughter. He was currently the youth music leader for the church he was associated with, was having kids come to his home in the now. And that definitely is one of the people I visited. And I don't know if it's snapping, perhaps it is, but just as a continuation of an off and on life practice, coming home and just seeing the veracity of it in this community, it's amazing. I think the state of Alaska has like one of the highest rates of sexual assault or child abuse. So I received some names from people in the community, but I'm not an idiot. I'm very smart, so I went and vetted them online first. And a good way to determine if a person is now molesting kids is to go see if they have a history of it. So not surprisingly, two or three or four of the names that I got when I went and checked on the registry, there they are, and they're registered sex offenders. Which brings to mind the question, why are they around kids now? So, for instance, one of them was convicted of raping his own daughter.
What's his name?
I won't say his name,
Oh, no.
but it's public record. But he had a daughter with his daughter that he was convicted of raping, which is particularly vile. And he was babysitting and interacting and holding that child now, which is against any sort of protocols that he had as a result of his conviction. Where was the state? I do not know. Why was the state not aware of that? I do not know. Incidentally, also what I found as this practice, proliferated a little bit, the state does not have the resources to make sure registered sex offenders are at the addresses they say they're at. So a number of times I went places to find someone to speak to them, knock at the door, and it's a completely different family that's there. Well, where is so-and-so? They don't know. He's not here. He's gone. So that's another issue that came to light, as a result of my practice is, bro, they are running amok everywhere. And 50% of the time, I would say, they're not at the address that they say they're at. Yeah, well, I was very particular in these interactions. Like, for instance, no gun, no mask, no knife. I mean, I could have gone in there masked up with a pistol and taped them up, tied them up, done whatever I wanted to, but I was very specific that I wanted to go face up, no gun, no weapon. I wanted to interact with each one of them hand to hand, like a man would do it. And again, you have to realize that as dramatic and horrifying as it all sounds, imagine being a little kid. I didn't get visited by a dude with a 2x4 one time. I got visited by a guy with a 2x4 100 times. More than 100 times. I got molested 50 times. So for me to go run into a child molester and open hand, slap and backhand his face 50 times and give him a lesson about molesting kids and then leave, to me it was extremely apropos and very righteous and super on point. And I didn't see why anyone would have any issue with it. I didn't see why other people were not doing it. I suppose it's important to note that every single thing I did and where I went was for very personal and private reasons. There were individuals that were directly affected by these people, and I wanted to do something for them. When I was a little kid, if anybody would have given a shit and kicked the door in and beat the brakes off the dude that was molesting me, I would have given a cheer. I would have believed in things greater than myself and miracles and all the sort of stuff they were trying to teach us in church. But that never happened. I was taught that your neighbors don't care about you and that your neighbors do not see any of the bruises. Your neighbors, your community will not step in to help you at all, ever. It won't. And I mean, to compound that belief, what I will tell you is your community will show up to condemn you if you do something wrong or break the law. Trust and believe. The court and the judicial system was immediately there to take the rest of my life away, for sure, real quick. There is an ocean of us, people that have survived child sexual assault. There is an ocean of us, and sadly, the primary byproduct of being assaulted as a child is isolationism. We separate, we isolate, we don't communicate what's happened to other people in general. Certainly not as we get older. It's not something that you're going to say at the dinner table when you meet new people. So we remain separated from the group. So it's very important to note that all of us together, we are much greater and much larger than any system or any system of justice that is currently in place. Survivors of child abuse, we are enormous. There's an ocean of us, and if more of us had the ability to speak out or file, change legislation, change laws, et cetera, then trust me, the predators would be a lot less confident in their predatorial behavior because they would be very concerned with 10 or 20 or 50 of people like me showing up to handle the business. It would definitely change things. So it's something important going forward. But to that end, there was one night that I was going to go visit somebody. It was a child pornographer. It's one of the ones I was convicted of assaulting. And there was a couple of girls. There was actually a couple of young guys there too. Also, strangely, most of the tough guys, if they were around, and I said, hey, bro, you want to come with me? I got to go visit this dude and tune him up and give him a little sermon about not molesting kids. They would be like, oh, no, bro, no, fuck that. I'm not going with. I don't want to go. But in this occasion, there was a couple of girls.
So I think in some cases, it's the only way to get justice. And unfortunately for those of us who are victims of crimes and have never seen the perpetrator punished, or punished so softly that it is maddening. It really does tend to take away any sort of faith in that system, if you had it in the first place. It's sometimes it's the only way. The heart of Alaska is its people, and the people are beautiful people, but even beautiful people can be broken, so it's got its issues for sure, and a lot of it does have to do with the isolation. And it's not a coincidence either that we have one of the highest violent crime rates per capita. We have very little people here.
They were very excited. Yeah, we want to go with, for sure. And so I brought two girls with me. And they came, and I remember the night we went to see this guy. Again, he was in an apartment complex, and I was knocking on his door, and he didn't want to answer. It didn't seem like he was going to answer. And really, right in the moment, I sort of started jimmying with his lock to see if I could get it open. He opened the door, and I immediately, grabbed him by the shoulder and the chest and pushed him backwards into a chair in his living room. And I told the girls, listen, man, whatever this dirtbag has, it's yours. Whatever you want, take it. He owes you everything anyway, so go ahead. And I assumed they were rummaging through his stuff, looking for anything that was valuable. Again, because in my opinion, convicted child molesters and child predators, they owe us everything. The fact that they're still here breathing our air and able to victimize other kids, to me, is just shocking. It's amazing.
Would you say another point you were trying to make was to instill fear in these people
Absolutely.
in the community?
100%. Absolutely. I don't think anybody can disagree, psychologists, psychiatrists, or otherwise. Fear is the greatest deterrent for someone with this particular psychological disorder. It's just not possible. They need to be scared to go act on their instincts. That's just the bottom line.
Well, I mean, I knew what was going on, and I was like pumped about it because, you know, like I said, the criminal justice system is just fucking corrupt, and it's a joke up here. I think I got dropped off with them, with Ashlyn and Lucky, and we then went to. Well, okay, so I know that there was. I'm not sure if Lucky disclosed this, but there was another, like a fourth party that was also a part of this, but they were solely information. You know, they were the ones kind of like doing the research on the on potential leads to the scumbags. You know, I'm part Alaska Native. I pass for white, and like I said, I've always expressed myself through my fashion and whatnot. So I don't have a hard time for people to open up the door for me. So that was basically like one of my first roles. You know, I was the gateway, you know, to an open door, you know. So yeah, I knocked on the door. The guy answered, and we went in and we told him, you know, this is what's going on. You know, you are, you know, the worst of the worst.
When I went to his home that night, his windows and his doors were all locked, and his master bedroom light was on, and I was knocking on his front door and his windows. He wouldn't answer his door. He was ignoring me completely. And I kept knocking and knocking for 45 minutes or an hour, and it's sort of telling. If I was just a regular, ordinary citizen and somebody was randomly pounding on my doors and windows for an hour at night, I would have probably called the cops immediately if I was that sort of person. So it's sort of telling that he did not. So I went back to my car. I had my tool bag in my car, and I pulled out a hammer. And I had a small backpack on, and I smashed out the side light by his front door. And I climbed inside of his house and went in, and it was a fairly large, you know, spread. And as I went back towards where I thought his bedroom was, there was a couple that was staying there, and I saw them coming out of the door. And I had seen his picture, so I knew what he looked like. And I told them, you know, get back in the room. This doesn't have anything to do with you. And they sort of backpedaled and shut their door. And then I went around to the master bedroom door, and he was trying to shut it and like barricade himself in his room. So I just, boom, kicked the door in, went inside. And I mean, it's kind of funny because when you see mugshots and you see a picture of someone when you're going to see him, what I failed to do was look at a height and weight demarcation. And this guy, man, I come in the bedroom and I'm like, this dude is a big dude. And so I'm telling him, man, get on the ground. He doesn't want to comply. Also, it's important to note child predators, child monsters, they are egotistical and narcissistic, judgmental people in general. And you could see that energy coming out of him right away. So I let him hit me a couple of times. And that's when that sort of energy was invoked inside of me. And I sort of, honestly, I reverted back to a childhood state because weirdly, he looked very similar to the guy that had adopted us when we were young. And I remembered that I had that hammer in the backpack. I'd set it on the floor in between us, and I just reached down and pulled it out, and I cracked him one time in the collarbone, and that dropped him on the floor. Then I hit him 2 or 3 more times, I think. And really in general, if I remember correctly, leaving his house, I didn't know if he was alive or dead. I really didn't know. I didn't go there to kill him by any means, but afterwards I didn't know. And as I'm leaving, probably the people I told to go back in the bedroom had called the cops, because as I get to the end of the street, they showed up right at the exact second and got me out of the car, kept me handcuffed outside for a very long time. I saw the ambulance and the fire truck go by, and I was sort of standing there coming to terms with, thinking to myself, like, man, I wonder if he's dead. I'm probably going to prison for the rest of my life. And
Did you think you were going to get arrested at all, like ever, when you were doing it?
Didn't care.
Oh, you just didn't care?
Didn't care at all. No, didn't care. You have to realize, bro, when I was 8 years old or 10 years old, standing in the courtroom while they sentenced the man that had just molested me to 0 jail time to serve whatsoever, I had already lost my life. My life had been taken from me. And that's what child molesters do. They take your life from you. And knowing it had already been taken from me, honestly, again, it's a societal issue, because it's a dangerous thing to have people living in your community whose lives have been taken from them when they were kids, because they grow up. It's a sad thing, but you don't care about yourself. You don't care about consequences. Trauma does really damaging and powerful things to your frontal lobe and causes it to not grow correctly, so you don't respond to things correctly. But no, in the moment, I didn't think about being arrested at all. I would tell you that it took a lot of effort on my part to invoke the anger necessary to physically manhandle somebody like that. But once I did it once, it's in there. Like, it's in there from when you were a child. So I mean, like, in this interaction with him, I was sort of taken back to being a kid. And I'm telling you right now, when you're standing late at night in the house with a 6'5" or 6'6", 350-pound child predator, it's not a fight you're gonna lose. Like, I'm not fucking losing this fight, period. So, but yeah, it took a great deal of effort on my part to invoke that sort of anger. Like I say, I'm not a mean-spirited person. I'm not a violent person. I don't enjoy fighting or beating people up. That's not my gin. And certainly there are plenty of people that do enjoy that stuff, but I run on intuition. I feel like in my lifetime I've been guided by energies other than myself, and I don't mean that in a creepy or weird way. I mean in a very direct and literal sense. I have found myself directed to the right place at the right time a number of times. I will tell you practically, if you're going in someone's home that is a child predator and you have no weapons or anything of that sort, you have to be very on point and careful, because they obviously have a house full of potential weapons there they could use on you, knives or a gun or whatever. You have to be aware of that. Usually my whole intended purpose would be, honestly, to open their consciousness by inflicting a little bit of physical pain and then deliver a message that sort of behavior is not going to be tolerated in this community. I mean, I was born and raised in Alaska. It's my home state. It's where I live. And then to come back here and these people are just comfortable and confident to victimize children, it just blew my mind. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
So, and I really think it's important to note that the only answer to this, do I think there should be all-out vigilantism and people running around punching other people in the face? Probably not. But there is a fourth mode of response, which is the most important mode of response. Unfortunately, we've been conditioned out of it for a number of generations. You know this, all your friends know this. His friends know this. There's 3 modes of response that we know. We call a stranger, first of all. If there's any crisis or anything is wrong, we go to the phone, we call a stranger. And we call what? Ambulance, fire truck, or cops. That's what we do, call a stranger if something is wrong. The fourth mode of response, which is the most important mode of response, no one's even aware of it and no one does it, and that is community response. If your house is on fire, tell your neighbor, and he shows up with a garden hose and buckets of water. If someone is injuring a child, the neighbors should be aware of it. The community response is the most important one of all. And most of us are not even aware of it. It blows my mind. So going forward, one of the things that I've been working on in here is all of this is about advancing the practice and advancing your perspective and your understanding of the situation. So clearly, I cannot advocate for people to be all-out vigilantes and tracking down on assaulting pedophiles. But what we've been working on is an app or a platform that connects communities to each other, their own members, something of an SOS type app or a community crisis response app, so that neighbors are aware. For instance, when I was a little kid, I remember showing up for soccer practice, and my legs were so bruised from being beaten with a 2x4, I couldn't run up and down the field. And rather than the coach recognizing that that is a kid in the middle of an intense child abuse situation, I remember him telling me, next week if you show up and you don't run like everybody else, you're going to be kicked off the soccer team. So you need to get your shit together and start being more athletic. And as a little kid, you don't know what to do when the people around you literally see what's going on and they don't speak on it or acknowledge it in any way, shape, or form. So I think if we develop some way, somehow, very practically, the fourth mode of response is community response. And interestingly, there were some places I went, I would go visit a condominium park, and there would sort of be the tough guys that, you know, sort of keep track of the place and know who's there and would stop somebody if they're breaking into cars. And they would run up on me and ask me, what am I doing there? And I'd tell them, well, bro, there's actually a child pornographer that lives up there, and I'm gonna go visit him tonight, so I'm just letting you know. And they'd be like, oh man, this is so great, man, I'm glad to see somebody, man, we've been waiting for something like this. And in fact, hey man, give him the name of that one guy that was fucking with that one girl, and they'd give me another name and an address to go to. So I'm just saying, a little bit of communication and communities being aware of what's going on within them is the answer to this. Some of the moments of self-awareness and clarity that I've had, I resented the system and I resented the laws that were in place. A good example of that would be, I'm currently doing a long prison sentence. So I have childhood trauma and PTSD that I should be addressing through therapy. I've got it paid for. I'm someone that's willing to do it by telephone or whatever. I start asking the administration, can I get a Skype once a week with a therapist? Denied. Can I get approved for a phone call once a week for teletherapy? Denied. Point being, currently, believe it or not, where I sit, I am not allowed. They're actively blocking me from seeking or receiving any childhood trauma therapy, no PTSD therapy. I'm not allowed to have it or participate in it while I'm incarcerated. However, if I was a child predator, I could move a couple of mods down from where I live and I could go to child predator classes and be released from prison early in the next year. So this is very, very important for people to understand that still to this day, the system that we live with to this day is built to facilitate child predators. And it's also really important for your generation to understand no system is built by accident. Systems and factories are not built without purpose. And what they like to do is say, oh, well, yeah, we don't know how it got like that. It's weird. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're totally right. I don't know how that happened. But I'm telling you, in your state, when you fly over one of Elon Musk's factories and you see this building and this building and this building, and you wonder, why did he build that factory? What I do is I look at what comes out the end of it, and I'm like, oh, shiny new Teslas. That's what he built the factory for, to produce those. Similarly, look at your system of justice. Look what comes out the end of it. That is what it was designed and built to produce. Look at me. This is what it produces. Tattooed up guys with very little hope for success. It's built to keep the warehouse full. It's built to release child predators quickly. And I'm telling you, I'm living the experience. Literally, they're telling me, God forbid we let you out because another child predator might get hurt. And to me, just hearing that message and knowing a human being actually says and thinks and feels that way, it's shocking. So it's easy to be critical of systems and it's easy to resent them. What it's more difficult to do is to change them. And the thing is, these laws and these systems, the laws were enacted and these systems are ran during my lifetime. So I could have been doing something other than the very grunt labor of showing up and beating up a pedophile. I could have been penning legislation or paying attention or making sure dudes in prison can get PTSD therapy if they have childhood trauma issues, you know. And I cannot even stress enough how high the incidence of crime related to childhood trauma. It's a direct correlation. It's intense. Like, I'm sitting there watching a TV show the other day, and the guy next to me, I'm looking at his left arm, and I'm seeing this series of burns all the way up his arm, 8 or 9 of them all the way up. And he's in here for like his 7th DUI or something, and he's telling me, yeah, bro, yeah, my dad was a real dick too. He assaulted me when I was a kid. And he's like, see those? Those are curling iron burns, where my dad used to hold the curling iron on my
Or was
arm.
he just casual about it?
Very casual, super cash. And I had spilled oatmeal on my wrist or something. And he's like, no, that's not a 2nd degree burn, bro. These are. And he shows me the burns all the way up his arm. And it just highlighted to me that I'm surrounded by guys whose history and what caused them to not care about their own lives or the lives of others.
The thing is, you have to realize, number one, I had an attorney, bless his soul, who was willing to represent me based on $2,200 worth of donations that I had accumulated. So when you're approaching sentencing and a case with 27 felony charges, and your attorney is operating on a $2,200 retainer, okay? This is literally like community service all the way around. Basically, the prosecutor's office, the way it works in Alaska, based on what my attorney told me, he said, look, man, we can take this to trial, and we can count on what's called jury nullification, which basically means, in legalese, that means the jury knows you're guilty and they know you did it, but they still find you not guilty because of why you did it. He said, we can count on jury nullification. He said, or if we take it to trial and they still find you guilty and jury nullification is not a thing, he said, then the state of Alaska will sentence you and they will stack the sentences back to back to back. So they will run them consecutively, not concurrently. So the state of Alaska is famous for doing that. Like if you have 13 felonies, they'll give you 5 to 8 years on each one, and they'll run those sentences back to back to back to back. So next thing you know, you're doing 144 years in prison.
Yeah, you thought you killed someone. So
I did.
I guess we could start there and volunteered.
Well, so that night when they arrested me, I was standing outside of my car, outside of this guy's house, and it was kind of interesting because a number of the police that showed up were like patting me on the back and asking me, did you get that motherfucker? Did you get him good? Stuff like that. So they were certainly aware he was flagged as a child predator. And I think there had been prior police reports throughout the course of the month or so prior to that, where they knew that I had been active in what I was doing. And I was sort of standing there like, yeah, I got him good, I did. And I was sort of coming to terms with the fact that my life was gone. I assumed he was dead. Again, that's a lot for a person to process in one moment, but it was just sort of settling into my consciousness, like I'll be living in prison for the rest of my life. And honestly, I sort of fairly quickly shrugged that off, okay, worth it. I mean, worth it, honestly, for the sake of some other kids not having to continue to live with that energy around, worth it. So as I was coming to terms with that, then I end up in the jail, and again, I'm a very private person. I have never spoken outside to the press very much at all, certainly not with anything else I've done in my life. And a couple of days later, you can imagine my shock and my chagrin. I see the newspaper come under the door, and it says something like Alaska's Avenging Angel assaults pedophiles or something like that, big letters on the front page. And number one, I was relieved that the dude wasn't dead, because I didn't really ever aspire to being a murderer, so I was glad. But number two, again, I was very shocked that it was him that reached out to the press and gave an interview after he left the emergency room. Again, oddly, that handle that I'm known for came from one of the pedophiles that I assaulted. And in that night, in that interaction with him, when he asked me, like, who are you and what are you doing here? And I told him, well, you can consider me an avenging angel for the kids you've molested. And he was the one that told the press that and gave an interview, So I was pretty shocked because I wouldn't expect anybody to put their dirty laundry out to the world like that, especially somebody like him. But once again, these are very ego-driven, narcissistic people, and even when being super hard checked and caught in the middle of his bullshit, he still wanted to go give an interview and seek sympathy from the world. I was absolutely shocked. Once again, I've never failed to be amazed at the veracity that the judicial system will come after people that target pedophiles. They defend and protect pedophiles like you would not believe. Within a week or so, I received a 27 felony count indictment. They gave me 9 felonies for each pedophile I visited, charged me for visiting 3. First-degree burglary, first-degree robbery, first-degree assault, second-degree assault, attempted first-degree assault. I mean, they literally just threw every single charge they could possibly come up with in the book at me. I'd like to say I was surprised, but I wasn't. I've come to expect that from the system.
Did the people who accompanied you, like the 2 women, did
Yeah.
they get arrested at all?
Yeah, so eventually, you know, that's another interesting question. Unbeknownst to me, one of the girls had brought her cell phone. So I got this guy in the chair and I'm open hand and backhand slapping him in the face, giving him a pretty righteous sermon about molesting kids. Well, unbeknownst to me, one of them had their cell phone out and was videotaping from behind what I was doing. So about a month or 2 later, I get an attorney visit and I walk in the room and he has the laptop facing himself. And I can hear my own voice coming out of the laptop when I walk in the room. And I'm like, what the fuck? And he's like, well, bro, I just got this from the prosecutor's office. And he turns it around. And there I am on video, someone that looks like me. And apparently she had been pulled over. They had seized the phone. They got a warrant, searched the phone, found the file, etc. But again, as I sat there and watched it, it's like a 3-minute video clip of me slapping this dude. Honestly, I sat there and watched it, and I was like, that's hella righteous. For real. That's a good-ass dude right there. I mean, there was nothing vicious or vile or, you know, I know a lot of guys that say a lot of things they want to do to these people, and that was none of that. It just seemed very appropriate and very righteous to me. And again, you have to correlate this with my childhood. You're talking about a guy who was beaten with 2x4s for years by people like this. So for me, you're getting a great deal of mercy if I show up and slap the shit out of you and tell you to stop molesting kids. I mean, that's pretty kind. Another thing too that's important now that you mention that is that, and this is in my opinion, think of it what you will, child molesters in prison are not an emergency. There's no children for them to molest. They're not a priority. They're already isolated from the community. So I'm not being critical of what anyone else, anywhere else chooses to do with them in their prison, but for myself, a child molester in a prison is not a priority to me. It's not a threat. It's not an issue. It's already isolated from the people that they would seek to hurt. A child molester in the community is an issue, is a priority, because they have access to kids. So that's the dividing line for me. And also, interestingly, not this prison, but another one I was at, there was a couple of COs that talked plenty of mad shit on the internet about me not showing up and assaulting the pedophiles in their prison. And I thought that was kind of laughable because I'm the only person in the room that has 23 years of his life on the table for handling shit. And people that don't do anything ever, you know, like to be critical and poke at somebody who would. So that's something else that I've dealt with along the way too is, and again, not this prison, but another one where they want to poke at you and push you into doing things, you know, so that's something else that I've encountered along the way, which is interesting. Yeah, so I am a simple is genius sort of guy. Like I'm a simple man. I believe that, you know, simplifying complex issues shows intelligence. So for myself, when I was arrested, I just evaluated the situation very quickly and I thought to myself, well, check it out. I'm gonna write a letter to the prosecutor's office and I'm gonna give them an offer against my attorney's advice. And the Anchorage Daily News was very kind to publish anything that I wrote front page, which was cool. And so I wrote him a letter and basically I told him, I will plead guilty to any combination of charges you wish, with one caveat, and that is my sentence is to equal in length what each pedophile I assaulted served in prison for their crime against a child. And I will serve each one of their prison sentences back to back to back. And I told him I will also serve the 3 years in prison suspended that you gave to the monster who made me, because I wouldn't even care about this issue if I wouldn't have been molested when I was a kid. And I think I'm probably slightly wrong, but total, it's correct. The child pornographer did 2 years. The guy that raped his daughter did 1 year, not.
The thing is, you have to realize, number one, I had an attorney, bless his soul, who was willing to represent. The thing is, you have to realize, number one, I had an attorney, bless his soul, who was willing to represent me based on $2,200 worth of donations that I had accumulated. So when you're approaching sentencing and a case with 27 felony charges, and your attorney is operating on a $2,200 retainer, okay? This is literally like community service all the way around. Basically, the prosecutor's office, the way it works in Alaska, based on what my attorney told me, he said, look, man, we can take this to trial, and we can count on what's called jury nullification, which basically means, in legalese, that means the jury knows you're guilty and they know you did it, but they still find you not guilty because of why you did it. He said, we can count on jury nullification. He said, or if we take it to trial and they still find you guilty and jury nullification is not a thing, he said, then the state of Alaska will sentence you and they will stack the sentences back to back to back. So they will run them consecutively, not concurrently. So the state of Alaska is famous for doing that. Like if you have 13 felonies, they'll give you 5 to 8 years on each one, and they'll run those sentences back to back to back to back. So next thing you know, you're doing 144 years in prison.
Yeah, you thought you killed someone. So
I did.
I guess we could start there and volunteered.
Well, so that night when they arrested me, I was standing outside of my car, outside of this guy's house, and it was kind of interesting because a number of the police that showed up were like patting me on the back and asking me, did you get that motherfucker? Did you get him good? Stuff like that. So they were certainly aware he was flagged as a child predator. And I think there had been prior police reports throughout the course of the month or so prior to that, where they knew that I had been active in what I was doing. And I was sort of standing there like, yeah, I got him good, I did. And I was sort of coming to terms with the fact that my life was gone. I assumed he was dead. Again, that's a lot for a person to process in one moment, but it was just sort of settling into my consciousness, like I'll be living in prison for the rest of my life. And honestly, I sort of fairly quickly shrugged that off, okay, worth it. I mean, worth it, honestly, for the sake of some other kids not having to continue to live with that energy around, worth it. So as I was coming to terms with that, then I end up in the jail, and again, I'm a very private person. I have never spoken outside to the press very much at all, certainly not with anything else I've done in my life. And a couple of days later, you can imagine my shock and my chagrin. I see the newspaper come under the door, and it says something like Alaska's Avenging Angel assaults pedophiles or something like that, big letters on the front page. And number one, I was relieved that the dude wasn't dead, because I didn't really ever aspire to being a murderer, so I was glad. But number two, again, I was very shocked that it was him that reached out to the press and gave an interview after he left the emergency room. Again, oddly, that handle that I'm known for came from one of the pedophiles that I assaulted. And in that night, in that interaction with him, when he asked me, like, who are you and what are you doing here? And I told him, well, you can consider me an avenging angel for the kids you've molested. And he was the one that told the press that and gave an interview, So I was pretty shocked because I wouldn't expect anybody to put their dirty laundry out to the world like that, especially somebody like him. But once again, these are very ego-driven, narcissistic people, and even when being super hard checked and caught in the middle of his bullshit, he still wanted to go give an interview and seek sympathy from the world. I was absolutely shocked. Once again, I've never failed to be amazed at the veracity that the judicial system will come after people that target pedophiles. They defend and protect pedophiles like you would not believe. Within a week or so, I received a 27 felony count indictment. They gave me 9 felonies for each pedophile I visited, charged me for visiting 3. First-degree burglary, first-degree robbery, first-degree assault, second-degree assault, attempted first-degree assault. I mean, they literally just threw every single charge they could possibly come up with in the book at me. I'd like to say I was surprised, but I wasn't. I've come to expect that from the system.
Did the people who accompanied you, like the 2 women, did
Yeah.
they get arrested at all?
Yeah, so eventually, that's another interesting question. Unbeknownst to me, one of the girls had brought her cell phone. So I got this guy in the chair and I'm open hand and backhand slapping him in the face, giving him a pretty righteous sermon about molesting kids. Well, unbeknownst to me, one of them had their cell phone out and was videotaping from behind what I was doing. So about a month or 2 later, I get an attorney visit and I walk in the room and he has the laptop facing himself. And I can hear my own voice coming out of the laptop when I walk in the room, and I'm like, what the fuck? And he's like, well, bro, I just got this from the prosecutor's office, and he turns it around, and there I am on video, someone that looks like me, and apparently she had been pulled over, they had seized the phone, they got a warrant, searched the phone, found the file, etc. But again, as I sat there and watched it, it's like a 3-minute video clip of me slapping this dude. Honestly, I sat there and watched it, and I was like, that's hella righteous. For real. That's a good-ass dude right there. I mean, there was nothing vicious or vile or, I know a lot of guys that say a lot of things they want to do to these people, and that was none of that. It just seemed very appropriate and very righteous to me. And again, you have to correlate this with my childhood. You're talking about a guy who was beaten with 2x4s for years by people like this. So for me, you're getting a great deal of mercy if I show up and slap the shit out of you and tell you to stop molesting kids. I mean, that's pretty kind. Another thing too that's important now that you mention that is that, and this is in my opinion, think of it what you will, child molesters in prison are not an emergency. There's no children for them to molest. They're not a priority. They're already isolated from the community. So I'm not being critical of what anyone else, anywhere else chooses to do with them in their prison, but for myself, a child molester in a prison is not a priority to me. It's not a threat. It's not an issue. It's already isolated from the people that they would seek to hurt. A child molester in the community is an issue, is a priority, because they have access to kids. So that's the dividing line for me. And also, interestingly, not this prison, but another one I was at, there was a couple of COs that talked plenty of mad shit on the internet about me not showing up and assaulting the pedophiles in their prison. And I thought that was kind of laughable because I'm the only person in the room that has 23 years of his life on the table for handling shit. And people that don't do anything ever, like to be critical and poke at somebody who would. So that's something else that I've dealt with along the way too is, and again, not this prison, but another one where they want to poke at you and push you into doing things, so that's something else that I've encountered along the way, which is interesting. Yeah, so I am a simple is genius sort of guy. Like I'm a simple man. I believe that, simplifying complex issues shows intelligence. So for myself, when I was arrested, I just evaluated the situation very quickly and I thought to myself, well, check it out. I'm going to write a letter to the prosecutor's office and I'm going to give them an offer against my attorney's advice. And the Anchorage Daily News was very kind to publish anything that I wrote front page, which was cool. And so I wrote him a letter and basically I told him I will plead guilty to any combination of charges you wish, with one caveat, and that is my sentence is to equal in length what each pedophile I assaulted served in prison for their crime against a child. And I will serve each one of their prison sentences back to back to back. And I told him I will also serve the 3 years in prison suspended that you gave to the monster who made me, because I wouldn't even care about this issue if I wouldn't have been molested when I was a kid. And I think I'm probably slightly wrong, but total, it's correct. The child pornographer did 2 years. The guy that raped his daughter did 1 year, 9 months. And then the guy that molested the 10-month-old baby served 3 years, I believe. Either way, all three of them, it came to 6 years, 9 months in prison for assaulting children in different ways. And so I told them, and put the 3 on top of that, that the person that you convicted of molesting me never served. That's 9 years, 9 months, run that. I'll plead guilty to whatever you want, let's go. And they laughed that offer out of the courtroom. They were extremely upset. And again, it was shocking to me then. It isn't now. Just the veracity with which the system comes at you. They did everything in their power to label me a drug addict. I was seeking out soft targets. I was just there to steal their property. I mean, bro, they went as far as they could to destroy me as a person and my character. And then they came with the 23 years in prison. And again, I remember standing in the courtroom in that moment. And I mean, really, the statement that I gave to the court before I was sentenced, honestly, was one of the most profound pieces of writing I've done in a very long time. And I did it while rammed in a pretrial jail, 3 to a cell, sleeping on a cot on the floor in the middle of piss and shit smells. And it was just a really profound piece of writing. It was well written, and it was super on point, and it was dynamic. And I've read a lot of things, bro, so I'm aware of that, and I will give myself the credit for that. But what was amazing is I read that statement to the court, and the judge dismissed it offhand instantaneously. Okay, thanks, I'm gonna go do my considerations for this sentence. And he came out, completely disregarded my offer, completely disregarded anything related to PTSD or childhood trauma or anything else, and the only thing that mattered to him was, we need to send a message to the community that is anti-vigilantism in nature, therefore, boom, drop the sentence. Also, interestingly, it was quite surreal for me to stand in the courtroom. 2 of the child molesters showed up to testify against me at my sentencing. One of them, the child pornographer, was there, went at length to tell the judge how awful it was for him, his name to be out there in the public, and now the community was aware of his crimes, et cetera, how he didn't really do it. He had had people staying at his house that used his computer and all this and that and the other. It's standard run-of-the-mill talk for convicted child molesters. And then the next one was the guy that I hit in the head with the hammer, and I remember again him going at length.
Where this man lives.
So the guy hit me in the head 6 times.
Wesley Demarest is one of several men Vukovic is accused of assaulting.
I figured he was going to kill me.
He says Vukovic broke into his home in the middle of the night and beat his head with a hammer.
He said, I'm going to, Avenging Angel, I'm going to mete out justice for the people you hurt.
In 2006, Demarest pled no contest to attempted sexual abuse of a minor. He's been on the list a long time.
I get off when I'm 72.
Telling the judge how awful it was, that he had to check all of the locks.
I don't think that their place they work should be listed. I don't think their address should be public knowledge. I think the name should be enough.
He says he thinks about his crime every day, how it's affected his own life.
How long do I have to pay for it every time I get turned down for a job?
But then he remembers his victim.
How long is she going to have to live with it? Yeah, okay, so I'll live with it forever then.
In some ways, he's resigned to his fate.
He was scared to sleep, and he was worried that I would come back and see him, and he had nightmares and this, that, and the other. And again, as an adult now standing in that courtroom, Internally, I felt a great sense of satisfaction because as he was describing what he was going through, I remembered my childhood and checking the locks on the doors and not being able to sleep at night and having nightmares and wondering if this piece of shit was going to come back again tonight and molest my brother and I. And I just sort of sat there to myself thinking, yeah, yep, that's exactly what it's like. Maybe you get it now. And he didn't. You know what I mean? He didn't get it. He still was sinking empathy and sympathy. Bro, they had representatives from the Office of Victim Advocacy was there to speak out against me and advocate for the pedophiles and how they were reformed people and how awful it was for me to have done anything to them, et cetera, et cetera. And again, that's absolutely shocking on the face of things that a court would deliver 3 times longer than all of the pedophiles combined served in prison for assaulting children. That's what they gave me to serve for assaulting them. And as the judge was saying he was delivering a message to the community, I thought to myself, message delivered loud and clear. Sadly, if you come to the state of Alaska and you want to molest little kids, it's not that big a deal. But if you come here and you dare target the people that molest little kids, they're going to put you under the building.
So that you feel that's why this case is significant?
Absolutely, 100%. And there is no other way you can read the sentence, what has happened after the sentence. There is no other way you can possibly read it. I have sent post-conviction relief appeals. I have any and everything we could do to get them to use some sense to apply to this sentence, and it's just not. It's not getting any traction whatsoever. But again, the community should be aware, and it's very, very important. Weirdly, I remember the same month that I was being sentenced, there was a rash of car thefts in Anchorage. And I remember sitting there 2 weeks before my sentencing, watching on TV, and that courtroom, bro, was absolutely packed and people flooding the hallways because there was people in town stealing their property. And families were outraged, and they all showed up, and they wanted these guys to get long sentences for stealing their stuff. Fast forward 2 weeks, and I'm standing in the courtroom, bro, and it's absolutely empty. Not a single member of the community showed up to give a shit about their own kids. Nobody. The press was there, a bunch of press was there, but no one from this community turned out to support me at all. No one. And that's not a criticism of the state of Alaska, but it is a commentary on where it's at. Again, we are trained and conditioned for isolationism and not to turn out to support each other. So again, prison populations are not the most socially cultured group of individuals. So in prison, respect is earned on the daily. It's what you do today or yesterday. That's how respect is earned. In prison, unless it's the old heads or the old school cats, nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. So there's not like it's not like people hold me in high esteem or high regard for doing a long sentence for smashing pedophiles. They don't care. Now, if I got up out of my cell and went down the tier and smashed one out today, yeah, they would respect the shit out of that. So the main thing that has happened while serving prison time, I started getting letters from all over the world, and I'm talking like well over 1,000 letters from people all over the world. And it's funny, the guys in prison are like, oh man, bro, all these babes are reaching out to you, and that's so cool or whatever. Well, what they don't realize is it was nothing like that. I got letters which were very plain and poignant descriptions of the abuse that these people had survived and made it through. And each one of them dignified a response from me, and it took time and effort to respond to each one of them. And I'm talking, bro, every country you can think of, every state in the union. Oddly, again, with the exception of Alaska, up until last week, not a single Alaskan ever wrote me a letter, not once, ever, nothing, absolute crickets. This state is insane with how people are. But that's been one of the most transformative things that's happened to me, is through the course of responding to everybody. Number one, I realized I wasn't alone, which was a first for me. I genuinely believed the whole time. It felt like you were running a race by yourself. just completely alone. And there was people from all over the world that showed up and came alongside me and said, yeah, that happened to me, and this is how I survived it, and this is what I did to change my life. And so it taught me a whole lot too about proper responses and what a person should do to react to that sort of thing. But it was absolutely transformative.
What do you want to do? So you're really. So, what do you want to do when you get out of prison?
Well, we're working on some of this now. So I have a homeboy. His name is Jesse DeLay. He's based out of Florida. He's a guy who did prison time in his life, and he runs a company called Hardcore Recovery. And this is a trauma and addiction recovery business. So he's offered me a job with him immediately, which will be great to help people with trauma and addiction issues. So I'm going to do that, be a recovery coach. But sort of the issue that is dear to my heart, like we discussed earlier, is developing a platform to facilitate this fourth mode of response, which is the most important one. Figuring out a way to get communities to care about what is going on within their own community. And it's not an easy thing, it's a difficult thing. And I think we'll start with distributing Narcan to address fentanyl. That's another thing I'm seeing now. These next two generations are on this fentanyl, bro, and it's blowing my mind to see these youngsters come in. And I've never even touched the shit, but they're using fentanyl and falling out, and people are dying. So I think if we can get communities, maybe we'll start there and figure out a technology where a pin is dropped if someone is overdosing, and then someone from the community that has Narcan can show up and administer it. A lot of the people that I interact with, they don't call police. They don't call, the fire department or the ambulance because they don't want to be registered as whatever. So we'll probably start there. I've also become certified as a mental health first responder. So if people are suicidal or wanting to kill themselves or hurt others in here, I'm able to respond. So we're working on a platform to develop community crisis response. And that's a really important thing because that is what is missing in my childhood. That's what's missing from your community. That's what's missing from all of our communities. We isolate and we interact with those that we interact with. That's it. We don't have any idea. You don't even know if your neighbor's kid is being molested. You have no idea. Yeah, and it's not your fault and it's not their fault. It's because there is no method of notifying the community what's happening. It hasn't been developed. So honestly, that's what I'd like to do. In addition to that, I would like to get some legislation going, certainly in this state. It seems to me simple and direct and basic that prisoners should have access to individualized crisis therapy, PTSD therapy. It seems like a basic right. And right now, I literally have been blocked from seeking out or receiving any PTSD therapy, denied, can't do it. So that needs to change. Most of the guys I interact with need it bad. I feel like it could be the keystone to reducing crime. It could reduce it significantly if people could address their core issues.
Yeah, can you go into Avenging Child Abuse, that book with Josh Young? So can you describe the process of that?
Yeah, for sure. So that was one of the coolest experiences I've had. Old Joshua Long, who is a PhD in criminologist at UMass in Boston, Massachusetts, reached out to me and he said he was considering writing a book and he wanted me to contribute a chapter. And I was in Seward at the time in this maximum security joint, and sort of my thing, I get up at 3 or 4 in the morning when everyone else is asleep, and I use that time to meditate and write and things like that. So I sat down and freestyled a chapter for him, and I build these chapters on plain white paper, and I sort of tape things to it, make a little header, and then write it in pen. Sent it to him, and man, he was blown away. He was like, holy shit, that's great. Send me another one. And I told him, just continue asking me questions. So point being, over the course of a year, back and forth, we basically ended up writing alternating chapters, and came up with this book together. And it was funny because initially he tells me, well, I really want to write this book with you, and we're going to call it Attacking Chomos, or something like that. And I told him, absolutely not, bro. That's what we're not going to do. I'm not writing a book called Attacking Chomos. No. And I initially told him, no, let's call it Legacy of Retribution. I also told him I will not write to you about the crimes. I'm not going to glamorize violence, so I'm not going to describe the crime or anything like that. But I will tell you what it's like to be a kid and grow up, you know, as a molested, assaulted, abused kid. I will tell you about that. And so that's what I did. I described growing up in different steps along the way. First time I've ever been published as an author, so going through that process has been interesting. They sort of arbitrarily change the title how they want. They pick the cover art however they want, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, it's called Avenging Child Abuse. I think it's available now. It came out, I think it's on Barnes & Noble or something.
Yeah, I pre-ordered it actually.
Oh, you did?
It's on,
oh yeah, cool.
So I think it's coming out on July 24th.
Oh, right on. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So again, ironically, I live in a prison where books from Barnes & Noble are not allowed.
Right.
So I can't even get my own book.
I think it's on I got it on Amazon.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't get Amazon either.
Oh.
We're allowed some obscure bookseller, that's it. So anyway, but I will tell you this, it was one of the more cathartic processes that I went through because I had never put on paper what I had been through. The other thing that is significant to that process is I had never had a person of merit come along beside me and tell me that my voice mattered or what I was saying was important. It had never happened to me my entire life, and it was powerful and transformative because I've lived within a system and around systems that are constantly scrutinizing your behavior and what you say, and they're writing you up and telling you you're wrong for this and you shouldn't have that, and look at what he's doing here, and this is bad, and just constant criticism and analysis. So to have a PhD come along and tell you, holy shit, you are smart and I need to hear what you say, and other people do too, was so empowering and so transformative that I can't stress that enough. It was amazing. So, you know, a lot of thanks to Joshua Long for seeing it, and also a person with those sort of bona fides who's willing to humble himself and learn and listen to somebody like me, who is just a nobody. I'm just a tattooed up prisoner. I can't even vote or bear arms, you know, was impressive. Like, I have a lot of respect for him for doing that, allowing himself and his opinions. Sadly, as much as it's cost me and as much as it has hurt, the opportunities that have arrived as a result of it are so necessary, and they're so potentially life-changing for others, that I can't even allow myself to say I would go back or change it in any way, shape, or form. And I give all of the credit in the world to others for that being the case. Because it turns out there are really good, amazing people on this earth that actually do care. And they've shown up and given me opportunities, and they've listened and allowed, you know, my experience to change them and how they interact with other people. And, you know, just because of that one thing. Also, I've received, like I said, a number of letters from people all over the world, and it turns out people that are living with the results of child abuse were desperate for an archetype or I don't want to say a savior, but a hero of some type for their community. They were desperate for that. We don't have that. But that never happens. So a lot of these people, when they wrote, they would say that they would just imagine in their mind it was me coming in and doing that in their case, and it was really like healing for their spirit to know somebody somewhere cared and it mattered. And actually, ironically, I got a letter from one of the victims of one of the people I was convicted of assaulting, and she now lives in another state. She was very explicit up front to say that she was anti-violence, doesn't believe in any of that sort of thing. But she said when she saw the news feed, she just absolutely broke down. and cried because it told her that somebody actually did care somewhere. And I connect to that sort of feeling, and that is exactly why I took the time to do it, for that feeling for a person somewhere that went through what I went through when I was a kid. That's the only reason why it mattered.
So you never had that until really prison, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, can you go into your sister, I guess? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's an
Man, well, I will tell you this. No matter what your form of belief is or the words you use to describe it, this universe is a very profound and dynamic place. So I told you about my brother at the sentencing telling me that he couldn't be around me because it just hurt too much, etc. So I pretty much went to Seward, went to the prison by myself. Next 20 years of my life are gone. Everything I own is gone. I have no family. I have nothing. I have no one. And mysteriously, a couple of months later, I get this second-day envelope in the mail, and it's a big one. And I open it. It's from some chick in Texas. And I'm a dude, so you know how guys think. I open it up and I look inside, and there's one envelope that has a bunch of her pictures in it, and there's another envelope that says "Read me first" on the outside. So again, I'm a guy, and I'm like, oh man, let me see. I'm like, oh shit, it's a cute chick. Oh, this is gonna be great. And I pull the letter out, and it says, I am your long lost sister. I've been looking for you for 20 years. And anyway, the first time I talked to her from that moment on, that's been my best friend. She absolutely is my little right-hand woman, is my absolute best friend. She and I get along great. There's nothing I wouldn't tell her. There's nothing she doesn't tell me, that's for sure. And it's just amazing how, you know, the universe will just deliver something to you that I didn't even know she existed. I didn't even know. So kind of consequence to losing my brother and everything else, I gained a sister I never even knew I had. It's been amazing. It's just a profound thing to have happen in my life. So very grateful for that. We talk every single day if she's not too busy working, which is often recently, but yeah, she's been my best friend. Built apparently all these platforms. Another thing too, I haven't even seen the internet in 10 years. I've been in here in a concrete shoebox. So apparently she's been doing a bunch of heavy lifting out there, and people are aware, which is cool. So I'm very grateful for that. People have donated money, so I was able to hire an attorney for this parole hearing. Perhaps that contributed in some fashion to them taking 5 years off of the rest of my sentence.
Can you go into that, the parole hearing? Because
Yeah.
it's a pretty interesting experience, you would say.
Yeah, it was a very interesting experience. So in preparation for it, I sort of did my own little research, asked guys what to expect, and they said, well, you're going to want to talk about your release plan, bro, and you're going to want to talk about what you've learned, accountability, it's a big deal, classes you've taken, et cetera, et cetera. So I prepared myself accordingly, walked in. There was 6 people at the front desk, 2 people at the desk behind them. There was a satellite uplink to Juno on the wall. Who was watching, we don't know. And the first question from the chairman of the parole board said, so, what is justice? Tell me, what is justice? And as soon as I heard him ask that question, then I knew, like, these people had been listening and watching and researching, and this was going to be a higher-minded discussion that was not normal. So we started there. Interestingly, that was my first, the question that Joshua Long, professor of criminology, and I had been batting back and forth, because even in his lofty level of understanding, he can't properly define justice for you. And that's a professor of criminology. So I did my best to answer that to him. The next person asked me, what's with all this hero bullshit? That's what she wanted to talk about, hero bullshit. And again, I told her, man, I live in here. I've never said anything like that about myself at all. I'm a simple person. What other people ascribe to me, you know, I have no control over. The next guy wanted to know, he asked me, similarly, he said, what's the deal with all your look at me stuff? I think that's how he put it. I see you're covered with tattoos. he wanted to know about this look at me stuff, and I've kind of found that pretty ironic because I was always a fat kid growing up. I'm not very photogenic. I don't take pictures of myself. I don't spend time in the mirror. There's no part of my personality whatsoever that's on some look at me type thing. I think that everybody has their own coping mechanisms. So a good example of that would be, I have conducted informal surveys amongst my peers the last 7 or 8 or 9 years doing prison time. Most of the burglars, thieves, alcoholics, drug addicts, drug dealers, et cetera, most have abuse in their history. They come from abusive backgrounds, the majority of them. It literally is the key to the issue of criminality in our country, is addressing childhood trauma and abuse. So for myself, I worked constantly, kept my schedule busy. If I wasn't busy, I self-medicated. I started out smoking weed, and then I started snorting meth. And self-medicating is a really, really good way to handle trauma, not address it, hide it, bury it. I ended up in a relationship for most of my life where we pretty much excluded outsiders to our world, and it was just the two of us, and we smoked weed together, and I didn't have a bunch of friends, and I didn't do anything but work and come home and, isolate from the world. And it's kind of a strange thing because I didn't even know anything about addressing trauma or working through it, or the fact that it affected me so deeply until later on in life. I was certainly one of those people that would tell you, "Nah, I'm good, everything's fine, I'm good. Nah, I don't even think about that anymore, I'm good." Meanwhile, what's actually happening is that sort of unaddressed or untreated trauma is actually guiding and informing all of the decisions and the way that you approach life and things like that. So, and tattoos, honestly, the hundreds of hours that I've been drilled on with a single needle tattoo, come to find out physical pain mitigates emotional pain. And every hour that you're being drilled on, my heart didn't hurt at all, not even slightly. And then eventually, what you end up with is an expression of pain and a life experience on your skin. That's how it works. So also in our culture, you sort of wear your resume on your skin. So people that are within this culture, they would see me and interpret certain symbols or markings as a resume or life experience of sorts. But hearing those questions coming in a series from these people just told me that, how they didn't know me. Not at all. They didn't know me at all. And it was kind of funny in answering that question. I told them, "Bro, I'm not photogenic at all. I hate taking pictures. I do it because my sister forces me to, for her reasons. And the last time I saw some, even I was shocked at how much tattoos I had, because I don't stare in the mirror. I don't even see it. I don't see myself." So next guy had for real, it was an old guy, had a bolo tie that was a bullwhip. A miniature bullwhip, so that will tell you what sort of person you're dealing with. And he basically said, well, you've been an outlaw your whole life, and now you found yourself caught up in something much bigger than you. And what's going to happen when all of that attention goes away? What are you going to do? And again, it sort of highlighted how they didn't really realize my experience, because I've been living in a concrete shoebox for the last 10 years. I haven't been watching me, and if other people are, that's great, but what I was hoping that they would do is arrive at a decision, and everything was in place. Like I say, hundreds of letters, bro, job offer, housing, PTSD therapy, every single thing you could possibly imagine, 43 classes completed, not a single thing left for me to do. I was hoping they would allow me to get out, because if they did, it would have benefited them, their community. Have things to impart to the community, and there's youngsters that need to hear from somebody that's been through it. There's things that I could have done to benefit them.
So do you feel one of the best ways to help a community out is having people who went through the similar traumatic experiences and sort of like a mentorship kind of
100%. Yeah, you have to. You have to. And also, what I know based on my experience is you cannot expect people to listen to your words or ascribe any value to them unless it comes from experiential knowledge. Experiential knowledge is the most profound knowledge, and that's the knowledge that people listen to. And by virtue of the fact that I've lived it, I feel confident to speak on the subject matter, and people will listen. So like I say, the next 2 generations that I'm seeing coming into this prison now, they're pain averse. A lot of them do not have a work ethic, and a lot of that is not their fault. It's what they've been shown, it's what they've been taught. Similarly, abused kids, they don't know to speak up. People don't know what to look for. They don't know how to notice it. I stood in grocery stores and on little camping trips and all types of things, and people looked right past a super abused kid with visible bruises, wetting the bed when I spent the night at somebody's house. That's not normal for a 12-year-old kid to do that. It's a sign of trauma. Someone should have asked, "Are you all right? Are you okay?" You know what I mean? So just little stuff like that. Yeah, communities.
What do you say it's like they know it exists, but they just can't
for sure
look at it?
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, for sure, there's that. I can't tell you how many times people have said to me like, "Yeah, bro, I totally get it. I would do the same thing, but I got kids, you know what I mean? I can't, I got a mortgage, stuff like I can't really, the thing is,
that's the thing.
right.
Yeah.
I will never appear in a public forum and ask people to break the law, ever, never. Because if you're a little kid and you've been molested and you've been in some sort of spiritual or emotional or physical bondage as a child, to grow up and live in bondage as an adult, it's a horrible thing to happen to you. And I know because I'm living it. It's a terrible thing. I wouldn't ask anybody to live this. But at the same time, if you're an adult in a community and you pay taxes, you are responsible for the systems of justice around you. We are responsible. It's up to us to change them. And also we're responsible for our neighbors and our community. We are, or else community doesn't even exist. So I have a couple of partners. I have a guy who's in Silicon Valley who's an app developer. We would like to get some sort of a community response platform and app on everyone's phone. Getting people to respond or care about their neighbor, ironically, is the most difficult aspect of it. The technology is easy and the platform is easy to develop and get it out there, but getting people to get up and step out and do something on behalf of their neighbor, that's the hard part. So and honestly, I haven't quite figured that exact component of it out yet, but it'll come. To keep it very, very simple, there's a couple of signs and symbols of an abused child. Look for bruises. If they are constantly the ones that are not allowed to come over and spend the night, or they can't hang out, watch for that. If you see bedwetters, watch for that. If they steal food when they're hanging out with your kids and you see them steal food, watch for that. Don't crack on them for being a thief. Ask them what's going on at home. There's very simple signs of a person that is being abused, a child. It's really important. And if you determine and establish that a child is being abused, oftentimes going at their parents or calling the police is not a great idea because it will isolate them. You have to work with the child directly. You have to tell them, "I see you. Come and tell me again tomorrow. Call me if you need some help. Here's a phone number." You have to let them know that they're seen. And honestly, that is like the single most important thing that we can do for each other, because if you can't help, maybe your friend can, or at least a child grows up knowing, will remember you too, which is another really important thing. Like, trust and believe. I'm 48 years old now, and I've just told you the first and only person that came in my life and said my voice mattered, and that he saw me and it was important what I was saying. That didn't happen until I was in my 40s. If that would have happened at any time in my childhood, I would be able to tell you which one of them it was that saw me and asked me if I was okay, and it would have changed how I saw my life. So That's what I recommend. Pay attention to these kids around you. They're showing the signs and symptoms of what they're going through, and it matters.
And people always kind of like make it like abuse is a small thing as a child. And it's like, oh, you forget about it, and stuff like that. And how would you I guess how would you describe like how gut wrenching it is to have it be taken, your childhood to be taken away from you, like, and stuff.
Yeah, it's a sad thing. The best way I can describe it to you is like this. Every child starts out with a psyche that is like a pane of glass. It is a clear, beautiful pane of glass. It's clear. I set that glass on the ground and drop a rock on it, and it shatters in a different way every time. And that's what happens to a kid that gets assaulted or molested when they're young. You drop a rock on their psyche, and each one of us, it will shatter in a particular fashion. Over time, some of them shatter and similarly to each other, but some of us can turn out to be drug addicts. Some of us assault other people. Some of us grow up and don't care about ourselves at all. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And the thing that society in general should realize is that these waves carry out into the biggest issues that you deal with on the daily. So another thing too is, I'm telling you, my tagline and what I constantly repeat to others is simple is genius. Simple is genius. Simple answers. Nobody has to go out and do something amazingly profound or complex. See one kid and let them know, man, are you all right? I just want to make sure. I saw you stealing that food out of the cabinet. Are you hungry? What's going on at home? Just one little thing. It matters if all of us are doing it, man. Problem solved. Problem solved. Similarly, if some fucking dirtbag is picking on kids and you know him, slap that motherfucker. For real. Let him know. Knock that shit off. Don't ever let me catch you doing that again. Do it. It's not that big a deal. I'm not saying all out assault people, but be a man about this stuff. There's plenty of men in this world that care, that should care. And I think being assertive and being direct when it comes to people like that is very, very effective. They should be nervous to mess with little kids. They should know, oh man, I know because so-and-so lives right up the street. I don't want to piss him off. I'm not going out there. That stuff is very effective. It's very real. So I'm just saying. Yeah, I remember telling her, and she had my brother and I sit on bar stools in the kitchen. She went and got the molester she was married to, brought him down, and then she told us, now you tell him what you said to me. And she absolutely did not believe us. What a kid like that has to do, which I didn't know to do, even if it literally is go knock on your neighbor's door, tell them. Go find somebody, that kid that you're playing with every single day, tell him you want to talk to his mom. And it's hella embarrassing, and it's going to take you completely out of your comfort zone, and your parents are going to be mad when the repercussions come as a result of you talking about that outside of your family. And a lot of times people are associated with a car that is related to their culture or their tradition from other places. Each group has their own lexicon, mode of speaking, so to say. So you have to learn to interpret metaphor, which is really interesting. It's the same with old religious manuscripts. Different prior masters buried the truth in metaphor and allegory. So in modern group culture, you do the same thing, so you have to learn their language. But I have encountered or been around people of all types and varieties. Interestingly, in the criminal world, there are representatives and leadership from all over the world in this prison system. So it's a good place to communicate and talk about what is appropriate or not appropriate going forward, There's been some founders of some groups that have come through and done time here very, very briefly. And it's really important to pay attention to those moments and those interactions, because that's your time to have an effect on someone who has an effect on a great deal of people. Yeah, I've learned a lot of things since I've been in here. Most of my time I spent associating with guys doing life sentences. We call them all day guys. And typically these are the ones 25, 30, 35 years into their prison sentence. They're the ones that have the most knowledge. Oftentimes they are in no way, shape, or form the same person that they were 40 years ago, 30 years ago, completely different human being. And they've learned a lot. Oftentimes they're spiritualists. Each one might be a master of a different field of study. whatever it is. Prison is it's a monastery of sorts, very, very similar, very eclectic, very rough around the edges monastery. So depending on who you associate with, you have the opportunity to learn and practice all types of things. So I mean, like I've sat in, I've done warrior sweats with the indigenous natives here in their sweat lodge. I've been roasted half to death in some of those. Ironically, you don't want to be the only white guy that shows up that day. But I mean, I've sat in rooms. We formed, like I said, Masonic lodges and practiced them for years, and that was a very profound experience because you have each officer in there. One of them is Islamic, one of them is a Sufist, another one is a Christian. Another one has a Hermetic belief system or whatever, and these are all guys, again, whose ticket to this experience was a murder, and none of them will ever be free again, and you have that profound opportunity to learn and practice old arcane spiritual modes of thought with them, and it's a really unique and privileged experience. It really is. There's something dynamic about having your life taken from you. It's a profound thing, and I'm sure it's the same if you're drowning or dying or find yourself starving and then eventually you get rescued or something like that. But there is something very profound about having your life taken from you. It changes you. And then, like I say, the choices that I've made along the way to associate with certain types of people and learn in certain fashions has been really amazing for me. Like, I mean, there's been a couple of times, imagine this, where I've been sitting, for instance, in the middle of an inipi, it's called. The inipi is the sweat lodge. And there's 88 lava rocks, and it's a warrior sweat, which means it's hotter than you can even imagine. And you have this moment of realization while you're sitting in there, heat exhausted and suffocating to death, that the richest man in the world could not buy a seat in this ritual. Elon Musk could not get a chair in this room. Can't. You would have had to have been sentenced and found yourself there because life organized it for you. I've sat in some rooms and had conversations with people that had mastered a particular field of study, and the fact that they've had the time and the ability and the interest to gain understanding of a particular mode of thought, and that they're willing to share some of their gems with you is absolutely profound. And again, the richest guy in the world could not get in the room with a non-Islamic Sufist and listen to his view of the universe. It's absolutely profound. So, and I say this to people often, you will be very surprised how long your life is and how it continues on far past a number of hurdles and obstacles. And you will think that you have seen as far as you can see, and there's no possible good outcome as a result of what you're going through. And then life will come through and amaze you. So you cannot ever give up. You have to continue on and learn to care about yourself. Another good insight is that, by way of example, there's a couple of youngsters that work out with me, and I train them in the gym every single day. And every time one of them is exhausted and I catch them leaning on a piece of weight equipment, I tell them, knock that off, man. If you need to lean on something, lean on yourself. Put your hands on your knees, lean on yourself, because you're the only person you can count on consistently, and that has been proven in my life. So lean on yourself, and you have to understand that you are strong and capable and your voice matters. And there are people out there who care. You just have to let them find you. And trust and believe. If I was around and I was free, I would care about each and every one of them.
Away with the trend. Heavy and so exhausted. Repeated, it's hard for me to do this as friends. But you